Hey guys, hope you're doing well. So today we'll be going into the German religious system. Now, what's different from this in comparison to some of the other videos I made is that the data is not as voluminous, and we do have a lot of gaps in information that is available, but we still can gain a lot of insights into what was there before. And what's of particularly striking character when it comes to German religion is just how much war and war as ritual for blood sacrifice energizes the religion and the myths that are involved within it. Also, towards the end of the pagan period, there's a particular focus on eschatology. Now, this was pretty common starting from the second century BC. You find it in Iran, you find it in Palestine and Mesopotamia, but was particularly unique among the German conception was that the end was connected with the beginning. In other words, the beginning, cosmogony, already contained the kernel of destruction within it. So, when we're looking into this, the fullest creation myth was recorded by the 12th century Icelandic historian Snorri Sturluson. Now, what's significant here is that Iceland was Christianized rather late, around 1000 AD. So you can still find authentic expressions of Germanic myth and belief of a pre Christian type still apparent. And in fact, many Germanic mythic themes survived well into the Christian area as well. But Snorri's recording is based off of a famous and rather beautiful poem, the Voluspa. And what this translates to is as the prophecy of the seeress. And this was composed towards the end of the pagan period. Now, according to the prophecy, in the beginning there was neither earth nor vault of heaven, but a giant abyss. And this is something we see common in many mythic creation motifs. Now, what's different here is that in the north lay a cold, foggy region called Niflheim, and this was identified with the world of the dead, and from which flowed a spring that gave birth to 11 rivers. In the south, on the other hand, was a burning land called Muspel, and this was guarded by a giant called Surtur. Now, the meeting of the melting ice and fire gave birth to an anthropomorphic being called Ymir. Ymir lived in the intermediate region, and Ymir may have a connection to the Sanskrit Yima, which means of two sexes. And the reason being that Ymir was bisexual in the sense that he was androgynous. He contained both male and female characteristics. Now, this type of androgynous being was common as a symbol of totality. And in this particular myth, while Ymir slept, there was born of his sweat under his arms a man and women, and of his feet he engendered another son. From the melting ice came into being the primordial cow, Adumbla, and it was she who fed Ymir on her milk, and by licking the salted ice, she gave the form of a man, Buri. Now Buri married the daughter of a giant and had 3 children by her, Odin, Vili, and Ve, and these 3 brothers descended to kill Ymir. And when they killed him, his blood poured forth to such a degree that it literally like consumed other giants and other beings, with exception of one giant and his wife who survived. Now, the brothers then took Ymir to the great abyss, and they dismembered him, producing the world from his body. His flesh became the earth, his bones became rocks, his blood was turned into the sea, his hair became clouds, and his skull became the sky. This may sound very strange to us moderns, especially if we have a Western Judeo Christian background, but a cosmogony based on the killing and dismembering of an anthropomorphic being is reminiscent of other ancient myths, such as the Mesopotamian Tiamat, the Indian Parusa, and the Chinese Panku or Pangu. The creation of the world is then the result of a blood sacrifice, and this is archaic and wildly disseminated. It is a religious idea that then justifies human sacrifice for the Germans as it did for other peoples. So it is a sacrifice that acts as a repetition of the primordial divine act. It ensures the renewal of the world, the regeneration of life, and cohesion of society. So, while pursuing their cosmogenic labors, the three brothers continued and they created the stars, regulated their motion, they created the earth, which was circular in shape, and it was surrounded by a great ocean. On its shores, the gods established a dwelling place for giants, and within it they built Midgard, which literally means the middle dwelling. It was the world of men defended by a fence made from Ymir's eyelashes. Odin created the first human pair from two trees, Asker and Embla, but there's also an alternative myth that tells of two humans emerging from the cosmic tree, Yggdrasil, and populating the world. During the great winter of Ragnarok, which is basically the apocalyptic event in the German mythic system, um, people will find refuge in the cosmic tree. According to Snorri, the couple who goes into the tree will be sheltered and survive the destruction during Ragnarok, and they will emerge to repopulate the world. Now, this tree, Yggdrasil, is situated at the center. It symbolizes and at the same time constitutes the universe. Its top touches the sky, and its branches spread over the world. Of its three roots, one plunges into the land of the dead, into hell, the second into the realm of giants, and the third into the realm of men. Now, from its emergence, all right, that is from the time that the world was organized by the gods, Yggdrasil was threatened with ruin. An eagle eats its foliage, its trunk was beginning to rot, and the snake Nighthawk, which you can see in this picture, begins to gnaw at its roots. On some not distant day, Yggdrasil will fall, and that will be the end of the world, known as Ragnarok. So, this image of the cosmic tree, the universal tree, is a well known image and symbol. The universal tree is situated in the center of the world and connects three planes: heaven, earth, and Hades. Um, Although it is ubiquitous, very, very common mythic motif found all over the world, the specifically Germanic features are that the tree, that is the cosmos, announces by its very appearance the coming of its own destruction. The decadence and final ruin for destiny or Urdar is hidden in the subterranean well in which Yggdrasil's roots plunge. In other words, it is hidden at the very center of the universe. Now, after establishing the ancestral pair in Midgard, the gods begin to build their own dwelling place, Asgard, still at the center of the world, but elevated. The pantheon is divided into two groups, the Aesir and the Vanir. The most remarkable among the Aesir are Tyr, Odin, and Thor. The first two correspond to the binomial of the sovereign gods in Vedic India, Mitra, and Varuna, while Thor, the god with the hammer, the most inveterate enemy of the giants, is reminiscent of Indra's martial character. The most important of the Vanir, Njord, Freyr, and Freya, are characterized by their wealth and by their relation with fecundity, pleasure, and peace. What we have here is an Indo-European mythological theme that is found among the descendants of Indo-Europeans. Odin is the most important of the gods. He is their father, their sovereign. His analogies with Varuna have been emphasized as both are the model of sovereign and are masters of magic. They bind and paralyze their adversaries. They delight in human sacrifice. But as we'll see, there are also important differences between the two. Now, in a passage of the poem Havamal, Odin tells how he obtained runes. These are symbols of wisdom and magical power. He was hanging for 9 days from the cosmic tree Yggdrasil, where it says, quote, wounded by the spear and sacrificed to Odin, myself to myself, without food or drink, and lo, the runes reveal themselves to my call. Unquote. So Odin, by a quasi self-sacrifice to himself, obtained occult knowledge and the art of poetry. And needless to say, there's some striking analogy to the Christian crucifixion of Christ. Now, Yggdrasil, which is the cosmic tree, literally means the horse of Ig, the horse or Drasil in Germanic, and Ig. Now, Ig is actually one of Odin's names. The gallows is called the hanged man's horse, and we know that victims who were sacrificed to Odin were hung on trees. By wounding himself with his spear, by abstaining from water and food, Odin underwent a ritual death and acquired secret wisdom of the initiatory type. Odin also has shamanic characteristics, and it's confirmed by his eight-legged horse, Sleipnir, and by the two ravens that tell him everything that goes on in the world. Like a shaman, Odin can change his shape and send out his spirit in the form of an animal. He searches among the dead for secret knowledge and obtains it. Now, other myths show the price Odin is willing to pay for wisdom. A giant, Mimir, who was famous for his occult knowledge, the gods cut off his head and sent it to Odin. Odin preserved the head by means of plants, and from then on consulted the giant's head whenever he wanted to learn certain secrets. According to Snorri, Mimir was the guardian of the spring of wisdom, and Odin did not get the right to drink from the spring until he had sacrificed an eye by hiding it in the spring. So this is why Odin in art is sometimes depicted as only having one eye, as if you take a close look at this picture, that's what he sees. So it shows the sacrifice he is willing to take to obtain knowledge and wisdom. And for this reason, by his quasi self-sacrifice to obtain runes, by sacrificing his own eye to drink from the well of Mimir, Odin is the undisputed master of wisdom and all occult sciences. He is at once the god of poets, sages, prophets, and warriors. Now, Speaking of warriors, and speaking of Odin, and how we were saying that there's similarities between him and the Vedic Varuna. What's different is that, unlike Varuna, Odin is a god of war. And in the ideology and practices of the Germans, war invades everything and colors everything. War constituted a ritual that is justified by a theology. First, there is the assimilation of military combat to sacrifice. Both the victor and the victim bring the god a blood offering. In consequence, heroic death becomes a preferred religious experience. All right? In dying, the ecstatic nature of the warrior brings him close to the inspired poet as well as to the shaman, the prophet, and the seer. It is by virtue of this glorification of war and ecstasy and death that Odin acquires his particular character. In fact, in the name of Odin, or Woden, derives from the root wut, W-U-T, which literally means fury. Now, we're going to move on towards Loki and towards the end of the world, and you'll see how this all intertwines. So, Loki, well known in popular culture for obvious reasons, is an enigmatic and ambiguous god. The etymology of his name is uncertain. He had no cult, and no temples were consecrated to him. Although he himself is one of the Aesir, he tries to harm the gods, and at the end of the world, he will fight against them. His behavior is a bit disconcerting and even disturbing because, on one hand, he is a companion of the gods and he likes to fight their enemies, the giants. But on the other hand, he is malicious, amoral, and criminal. His demonic nature is confirmed by his offspring. The wolf, Fenrir, and the great snake are his sons. Hel is his daughter, she to whose gloomy land the dead go who have not earned the right to Valhalla. Now, some scholars have proposed that Loki is analogous to the sinister personage in the Mahabharata, Duryodhana, the supreme incarnation of the demon of the age. So there's a harmony between the Edda and the Mahabharata that point to there being an eschatological myth that must predate the dispersal of the Indo-European peoples. Now, when it comes to the end, or rather, more specifically, the destruction of the world, it contains many cliches, such as the moral decline, men killing one another, the earth trembling, the sun growing dark, stars falling to the earth, and monsters being unchained and made free descend on the earth. The great snake emerges from the ocean, brings cataclysm, and finally the armies of the gods and heroes meet the armies of the monsters and the giant for a decisive battle. In this battle, all the gods and all their opponents fall in this cataclysmic eschatological battle, with the exception of the guard of the underworld, Sutur. Surviving, he lights the cosmic conflagration, and all traces of life disappear. The whole earth is swallowed by the ocean, and the skies crumble. Yet, it is not the end. A new earth emerges, green, beautiful, fertile as never before, purified of all suffering. So that is a short introduction into Germanic religion. You clearly see some patterns with other Indo-European systems, and in fact, you see a lot of similarity in what E. Michael Witzel referred to as Laurasian mythology. Um, Now, what's interesting is that the Germanic genius added its own features, and it goes to show how religious systems are really living systems. That is, that they're not static, they assimilate, they form symbioses, and they evolve and intertwine. And, the Germanic system in many ways still survived into the Christian period because you see it, for example, in the Epic of Beowulf, which, clearly has a lot of quote unquote pagan elements into it. But anyway, I hope you found that useful and wish you folks a nice day.